Good morning. I'm Christine Romans in for Joe in Savannah this morning. We begin this morning with politicians pointing fingers over that government shutdown as the White House threatens to make permanent cuts to federal workers and projects. President Trump posting on Truth Social, quote, Republicans must use this opportunity of Democrat-forced closure to clear out deadwood, waste, and fraud. Some federal workers are now waiting for imminent layoff notices, while others could soon be furloughed or forced to work without pay unless the government reopens. Two more votes failed to clear procedural hurdles in the Senate yesterday on the funding bills that the Republican-controlled House passed earlier this week. The Senate is out of session today due to the Yom Kippur holiday. The earliest any votes could come next is Friday afternoon. It comes as the White House points to a New York Times poll out this week. It shows 65% of Americans said Democrats should not shut down the government, even if their demands aren't met. Still, some Democrats say federal workers are behind them, at least for now.
They may be the strongest group yet saying, you got to push back. Now, the question will become, will they have that same view 3 weeks from now? I don't know.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba is standing by with more on what the Trump administration is saying. But first, let's go to our Capitol Hill correspondent, Melanie Zanona, for the latest from Congress. Mel, good morning. So the Senate reconvenes tomorrow. How are Republicans trying to get the remaining Democratic votes they need in order to reopen the government?
Yeah, good morning, Christine. The Republican strategy here is to just keep holding votes to open the government over and over again. The hope among Republicans is that the pressure is going to grow on Democrats, especially as the shutdown drags on and as the impacts are starting to be felt by the American people. And so far, 3 Senate Democrats have voted to support the GOP plan to keep the government funded through November 21st, both on Tuesday and yesterday when they took those votes. They're planning to vote again Friday on that exact same bill. So we'll be watching to see if any additional Senate Democrats break. They need 8 Democrats total to join Republican forces in order to pass this bill. But as of right now, Democrats see very little incentive to cave, at least this early in the fight. They are still pushing very much for an extension of those Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of this year. And while there's no leadership discussions at the moment about a deal and the two sides are not talking, there was notably a bipartisan huddle on the Senate floor yesterday during one of those votes. And the lawmakers involved, their rank and file members, they told us that they were kind of just spitballing ideas, talking about ways potentially to reopen the government. So there clearly is a desire among the rank and file to find a way out of this. It is still very early, though, and we are still a far way away from any potential deal, Christine.
You know, we're now seeing this message battle, right, between the Democrats and Republicans over who gets the blame for the shutdown. I want to play something the Vice President, J.D. Vance, said using a misleading claim that's become a Republican talking point. Let's listen to some of that, and we'll talk on the other side.
What they have done instead is to shut down the government because we won't give billions of dollars to health care funding for illegal aliens. That is what has actually happened. They said to us, we will open the government, but only if you give billions of dollars of funding for health care for illegal aliens. That's a ridiculous proposition.
So Vance is talking about Democrats there, but I want to be very clear. U.S. law prohibits federal health care benefits for undocumented immigrants. It's illegal. And Democrats say they are not trying to change that law. So what are the facts here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is a false claim. It's misleading at best. As you mentioned, Democrats are pushing to extend Obamacare subsidies and to restore cuts to Medicaid that were included in Trump's mega law earlier this summer. But they are not trying to change the eligibility requirements. As of right now, under federal law, undocumented immigrants are not allowed to receive Medicaid. They're not allowed to receive Obamacare subsidies. The one thing that is in the Democratic plan is that they do support health care for something known as legally known lawful immigrants. So people that are very much documented, that are trying to go through the legal system with the court system. So they are not undocumented. They're people think like dreamers, for example. Those people are people that Democrats do want to give health care to, but they are not trying to give any health care to illegal immigrants. But I think it does show that for Republicans, they don't feel like they have a strong argument when it comes to health care. So they're trying to put an issue that is front and center with their base, which is illegal immigration. But this is just another example of the messaging war that we're seeing back and forth between the two parties.
Those health care subsidies, if they are allowed to expire, as they are going to expire, health care costs would spike for millions of people next year. Before we go, I know you've been keeping an eye on how all this is impacting federal workers. What's the latest there?
Yeah, so obviously in a shutdown, thousands of federal workers are either going to be furloughed or they're going to be forced to work without pay. And now the stakes are even higher because the Trump administration is planning to make this as politically painful as possible as a way to try to prod Democrats into acting. I was told that yesterday there was a House conference call with House Republicans, and the budget director actually informed Republicans that they're planning in the next 1 to 2 days to carry out mass layoffs of the federal workforce. That would be permanent. So on top of already a disastrous shutdown, which will have impacts not just here in D.C., but all around the country, now potentially adding on top of that, you're going to have people losing their jobs altogether. The federal workforce has already been demoralized from the DOGE cuts earlier this year. So it's really shaping up to be quite a nightmare for federal workforce.
All right, Mel, thanks for that. Let's now bring in NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, good morning to you. So in an unprecedented piece of politicization, several federal agencies are putting the blame for the shutdown squarely on Senate Democrats. The agencies doing that. This is a big contrast from how departments have dealt with shutdowns in the past. Usually they just kind of give you the nuts and bolts of how the agency is going to operate, or not operate in a shutdown. How is the Trump administration using government websites and emails to politicize what's happening here? Walk me through your reporting.
Yeah, Christine, this is notable because typically it would be pretty boilerplate, straightforward language that is nonpartisan. But we are seeing everything but, with examples on those websites that are official government sites with large banners across the top. For instance, the Housing and Urban Development website had a message that you see there that would pop up that said, the radical left in Congress shut down the government. HUD will use all available funds. The State Department did the same thing. And then over at HHS and at the Department of Labor, we know that some employees were offered language that they were asked to put on their out-of-office replies that similarly had some of this partisan messaging that blamed Democrats for the shutdown and that essentially said, I won't be able to respond until Senate Democrats support the House-passed stopgap funding bill or another measure. And again, that's highly unusual and different from how we've seen messaging in past shutdowns, but it really takes a page from what the White House has been doing and what they have tried to do even on whitehouse.gov, on that official government website, which is to play a montage of Democrats and their own comments about trying not to shut down the government. And again, squarely placing the blame on them. And we've also seen this in some other language. And again, we should just point out, it is really, really unusual since these agencies are supposed to be nonpartisan, in particular, these civil servants who aren't political appointees in some of these cases are being asked to amplify the same messaging.
And New York City is being targeted directly by the government shutdown. White House Budget Director Russell Vought posting on X that $18 billion in funding for infrastructure projects was paused to ensure the money was not, quote, flowing based on unconstitutional DEI principles. What should we know about that decision and how New York City could be affected?
Yeah, these are two major projects that people who live in New York, where you are right now, are pretty familiar with. This is the Hudson Tunnel project and the Second Avenue subway project, infrastructure projects that have wanted this kind of funding, some of which was allocated and secured in the Biden administration through that infrastructure law, and that they have been trying to do a lot of work on, that now the Trump administration is saying that is frozen as they evaluate, and they have put some of the people who were in charge of that on furlough, and that's why they cannot work on it through the Department of Transportation right now as well. And the OMB director has signaled, Christine, that there could be more to come, that they're going to look at some of these other programs, and there could be potential patterns and more of this. But when we talk about New York specifically, that directly impacts, of course, Leader Chuck Schumer, Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who both represent New York. And so that is a specific angle there that's important to point out, too.
And Monica, we heard yesterday from the Supreme Court regarding President Trump's effort to fire Lisa Cook as a board member of the Federal Reserve. The High Court ruling that she can stay in office and do her job, at least for now. Walk us through this decision and where this goes from here.
Yeah, remember that she had sued the federal government, saying that she didn't believe it was appropriate or correct for her to be fired. Remember that the Trump administration had made these claims and allegations about mortgage fraud, which she and her team of lawyers have denied. Well, now the Supreme Court is saying that she can stay in her position for now, at least for the next couple of months, and oral arguments will be set for January. And the White House, for their part, says they believe they will be victorious when this is heard in January. But for now, it is important for the Fed's independence, according to the lawyers, that she can stay in this position on the Board of Governors, at least for now.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much for that. In economic news, there are more worrying signs for the job market after private payrolls saw their biggest drop in 2.5 years in September. Private companies shed 32,000 jobs during the month. That's according to payroll management company ADP. Markets had expected to see a growth in jobs. The numbers raised new concerns about the economy amid the ongoing government shutdown. Here to talk more about this is Investopedia's editor-in-chief, my friend Caleb Silver. Caleb, so more evidence of a rough patch in the job market from that ADP report.
Yeah, losses when a lot of people were expecting gains, and now the cloud gets a little cloudier because we're probably not going to get the September payrolls report tomorrow because the BLS is shut down. So flying blind a little bit when it comes to knowing what's happening in the labor market, but we do know that it's deteriorating. We've seen that with the revisions over the past year and over the past few months. And this ADP private payrolls report, it's only 10% of companies that use private payrolls, but still a pretty good snapshot of the fact that things are actually weakening more than a lot of people expected.
Yeah, in normal times, as you mentioned, we would see that jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics tomorrow. It's the first Friday of the month, right? But BLS is dark because of a government shutdown. Unless the government reopens today, which I don't think anybody expects will happen, that report is not going to be prepared. What does this mean, you think, for the Federal Reserve when it meets at the end of the month? Is it flying blind here? It has other gauges it looks at, I'm sure.
It has other gauges, but it'll miss this, and it'll probably miss the next inflation report if the government doesn't reopen the CPI report that's due out next week. So it'll be missing two key important pieces of data as it thinks about what to do next with interest rates. A lot of people are expecting at least one more interest rate cut this year, maybe another quarter point cut that might come at the December meeting. But without the data, the Fed doesn't really know what to do and can't really make that decision, but it still might go forward with that at the end of the month. There's a lot of time between now and then, and a lot can happen. That said, when you look at what the Fed has to deal with, they're dealing with a labor market that's weakening and prices that are rising due to tariffs, caught in a really strange place right there. But at the same time, companies without this data are having a hard time making decisions. If a lot of companies rely on that government data, on the employment data, to make decisions about hiring and about expansion plans, they won't have that either.
You know, Caleb, bigger picture, how do you see the government shutdown affecting the broader economy and financial markets? I mean, markets kind of shrugged it off yesterday. Historically, they tend to, maybe there's a disruption, a little bit of disruption, but they move through it. The bigger impact is really on, I guess, Main Street, right? And people who hold jobs that might be affected by potential layoffs here.
Absolutely. So we're talking about federal employees being on furlough, and they'll eventually get back pay if and when the shutdown ends, and if they're not fully terminated through a lot of these threats. But what you see is a slowdown in GDP and gross domestic product, which really comes from spending. In 2018, we saw a slowdown of about 0.5% in GDP, but you feel it when you actually are on furlough and you miss a paycheck. That's a problem. You miss two paychecks, it becomes a crisis for a lot of people. And then there's the private contractors tied to government agencies that will be shut down. They may be furloughed as well. So you get this domino effect of people not getting their paychecks, not spending, that ultimately slows the economy, and that could lead to stagflation, potentially a recession if it lasts long enough. The stock market doesn't care because investors are used to this type of dysfunction with our government. But for real people in the economy, especially those most vulnerable, this could become a crisis.
Yeah, rent is due, the mortgage has to be paid, student loans have to be paid, the car payment comes even if there's not a paycheck or it comes retroactively. Caleb Silver, so nice to see you. Thank you. All right, from Rome, Pope Leo is weighing in on President Trump's handling of immigration across the country. The Pope publicly calling the Trump administration's treatments of immigrants here in the U.S. inhuman. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more on how the White House is responding.
For the first time since celebrating his inaugural Mass, the American Pope from Chicago weighing in on U.S. politics. Pope Leo seeming to criticize the Trump administration over the president's immigration policies.
Someone who says that I'm against abortion, but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants who are in the United States. I don't know if that's pro-life. So they're very complex issues. I don't know if anyone has all the truth on them. But I would ask first and foremost that there be greater respect for one another.
The rare remarks coming after his predecessor, Pope Francis, also slammed the president's crackdown on illegal immigration. Tonight, the White House pushing back on Pope Leo's comments.
You've been very open about your Catholic faith. How do you respond to that?
I would reject there is inhumane treatment of illegal immigrants in the United States under this administration. There was, however, significant inhumane treatment of illegal immigrants in the previous administration as they were being trafficked and raped and beaten, and in many cases killed, over our United States southern border.
Pope Leo also said President Trump's rebranding of the Department of Defense to the Department of War was concerning. But he did show support for the president's proposed peace plan for Gaza, calling it realistic and saying he hoped that it would be accepted.
All right, there's breaking news out of England this morning where a major incident has been declared after a car and stabbing attack at a synagogue on Yom Kippur. 4 people were injured in the attack in Manchester. 2 have since succumbed to their injuries and died. According to the city's mayor, police were called to the Heaton Park Synagogue by someone who witnessed a car being driven toward members of the public there and saw one man stabbed. The mayor said the suspect was shot by police. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was, quote, appalled by the attack in a post on X, adding that the fact that this has taken place on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, makes it all the more horrific. The investigation into this attack is ongoing, and we'll bring you more details later this morning. An investigation is underway this morning after 2 regional planes clipped each other while taxiing at LaGuardia Airport here in New York. The incident happened just before 10 p.m. last night when Delta Airlines says 2 of their Delta connection flights made contact with each other. Preliminary information shows the wing of a plane that was set to depart made contact with the fuselage of the plane taxiing to its arrival gate. 1 minor injury reported. This is the latest incident involving close calls or collisions of passenger aircraft this year. In a statement, Delta said that the safety of employees and passengers comes before all else and that they were cooperating with the relevant authorities. This morning, Hurricane Imelda is weakening as it pushes out to sea, but not before leaving its mark on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Powerful waves from the storm have ripped several oceanfront homes from their foundations, washing them into the sea. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the latest.
In Buxton, North Carolina, these homes were no match for Mother Nature. The stormy surf causing 5 houses to collapse in less than an hour before a 6th was destroyed. Officials say the homes were unoccupied following damage this summer from Hurricane Erin. More appear to be in danger.
I looked down at my cell phone, thanks to social media, and saw my house falling in the ocean. It was shocking.
Christy Roberson called her home Infinity and says it was the most special place in the world.
My moments in Infinity and the moments shared there will always be the love story.
The devastation was triggered by Hurricanes Umberto and Imelda, which are lashing the East Coast with massive waves. For years, the Outer Banks have been hampered by erosion from storms and rising sea levels, driven by climate change.
If you had been at any one of these properties 10, 15 years ago, you would have had to take a football field walk to get to the beach. But we've had that erosion process taking place for the many decades.
Since 2020, 18 different houses have collapsed in the area, according to the National Park Service. Some deciding to literally pick up their homes and move inland. Communities have also used sand to reinforce beaches, but those are only temporary fixes as oceans rise and storms get stronger. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
What pictures? All right, as the surf continues to churn up and down the East Coast, let's get a check on your morning news now weather. NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman tracking some rainy days for the Sunshine State. Angie, good morning.
Hi, Christine. Good morning. The Sunshine State not living up to its name over the next couple of days. You're exactly right. We've got some showers and thunderstorms already in the picture early this morning, and especially hugging the East Coast. That's going to be kind of the general vicinity, but of course, that onshore breeze is going to push all of that activity across the state as the next couple of days go on. So here's a look at your day today. Again, local downpours likely. We'll see that potential for, because we have multiple days of heavy downpours, the potential will be there for isolated flash flooding. So a heads up for folks that live across this region. You're going to be in and out of this essentially as the weekend goes on. And between now and then, we could pick up a good dose of rain. In some spots, again, especially closer to the East Coast, you're going to see anywhere from 3 to 5 inches, maybe some isolated amounts higher than that. So heads up for bringing the umbrella, and then, of course, watching for the flooding that occurs, especially in the those areas that you oftentimes see flooding when we have a rainy period across this region. Otherwise, we've got to take one look at Hurricane Imelda. It is still maintaining Category 1 hurricane strength. It's about right now 170 miles to the east-northeast of Bermuda. Overnight, that island, of course, dealing with the worst of the impacts from this system. Now it is, of course, pulling away, and we'll start to see conditions improving significantly as the day goes on. So they have a little more time where they're likely still dealing with a little bit of rain, obviously the rough surf nearby, that kind of situation along the coast, but the potential for some gusty winds still there as well. But between now and essentially later today, we'll see this system weaken, and then we will no more be worried about Imelda here as we go through the next couple of days. One thing to note, if you live across New England, grabbing the extra layer is going to be handy this morning. We've got the frost advisories and the freeze warnings up across much of this region. We saw the same kind of scenario yesterday. A little bit warmer in some spots, but still needing that extra layer for sure. We've got some 20s, some 30s, some 40s out there. So feeling much like fall across that region. A very different story across most of the middle of the country. You look anywhere from the Rockies to the Ohio Valley, from the Northern Plains to the Gulf Coast, and we've got temperatures running way warm. It's 90s across Texas, upper 80s for Kansas City today. And if you're looking for some relief tomorrow and maybe wanting to feel like fall, well, you don't get it if you're in the Northern Plains, because we have a chance for record warmth. We've got upper 80s to mid 80s expected across a good chunk of the Midwest. We've still got the 90s for Texas. And essentially, we roll into the weekend and this upcoming work week, and there is no sign of fall. We've still got the high 80s in a lot of these spots, Christine, low 80s in Raleigh. I think if you're looking for the cool air in New York City or Philadelphia, it's upper 70s is all you're going to get.
So you don't have to change any closets yet.
That's right.
You know, no work on the closets.
Keep the short sleeves out.
All right. Thanks, Angie. Nice to see you.
You too.
All right. This morning, the world is remembering renowned primate researcher Jane Goodall, a trailblazer who ventured into the wild to study chimpanzees and in the process taught the world about the interplay of animals, nature, and humankind. Many Americans came to know her through National Geographic specials, remember, that brought her research right into their living rooms. Goodall died at the age of 91. Here's NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson with a look back at her life and legacy.
It was perhaps a basic instinct that chimpanzees recognized they had a friend in Jane Goodall, the young British woman with little scientific training who went to Tanzania in 1960 and changed the way we look at these great apes by doing everything established scientists thought was wrong.
When I got to Cambridge finally, they were totally horrified. I'd named the chimps instead of numbering them. I talked about them having personalities. I talked about them having minds and being able to have rational thoughts and emotions, happiness, sadness, fear. And all of these things were supposed to be attributes only of humans.
She discovered the chimps could make tools, described wars between groups of chimps, and captivated the world.
Fortunately, when I was a child, I had a great teacher who taught me that in this respect, these erudite scientists were completely wrong, and that was my dog, Rusty.
The child that fell in love with Tarzan of the Apes, as an adult, conducted her research by immersing herself in the chimp's habitat for endless hours of observation, building trust with her subjects.
Being out in the wild, you know, back when I dreamed of it, there was nobody doing anything like that.
Goodall devoted her life to the protection of the chimps and the earth, fighting against the destruction of forests and, more recently, climate change that threaten this endangered species.
If all around the world the importance of protecting and restoring forests was understood, that would go a long way towards mitigating the effects of climate change.
Goodall married twice and had one son, but her lasting legacy is the relationship forged in the wild.
I want to be remembered for having helped people to understand the true nature of animals, that they do matter as individuals, that they do have a part to play in the scheme of things, and they're not just objects, they're beings, and they're part of it.
Teaching us about chimpanzees and ourselves. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.